The weight of secrets can crush even the strongest souls, and for Vera, it was no different. She carried not only the life growing inside her, but also the suffocating burden of Mikhailo's betrayal. When she told him about the pregnancy, his response wasn't joy or excitement, it was cold calculation. 6 months, he had said, as if their unborn child were nothing more than an inconvenience to be scheduled around. 6 months to delay marriage, 6 months to ensure his finances wouldn't crumble under the weight of responsibility. But what Mikhailo didn't realize, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that Vera wasn't just fighting against him. She was battling the judgmental stares of society, the whispers behind closed doors, and the relentless pressure from her own family, who demanded answers she couldn't give. Her world felt like a fragile glass teetering on the edge of a cliff, ready to shatter at any moment. Meanwhile, Igor stumbled upon fragments of this hidden turmoil one fateful evening. He had been passing by when voices seeped through the cracks of the door, Vera's desperate pleas colliding with Mikhailo's detached reasoning. At first, he thought it was another meaningless argument, but something about the tone gnawed at him. It wasn't anger in Vera's voice, it was fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of losing everything. And then there was Mikhailo's voice, calm yet distant, as though he were discussing business rather than the future of a woman carrying his child. That night, Igor lay awake, his mind racing with questions. Why did Vera sound so broken? What kind of man could treat someone they claimed to love with such indifference? But the real shock came days later when Igor found an old letter tucked away in a drawer. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places where tears must have fallen onto the page. "Please don't leave me," Vera had written. "Don't leave us." The words hit Igor like a punch to the gut. His father, a man he had always admired, despite their strained relationship, wasn't the hero he believed him to be. Instead, he saw glimpses of a coward, someone willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood for selfish reasons. Rage bubbled inside Igor, hot and unrelenting. How dare his father treat Vera, and by extension, him, with such callousness? Determination replaced confusion as Igor vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The shadows of the past never truly fade, and for Vera, they were about to become suffocating. She had carried the secret of Igor's true identity for years, a burden that weighed heavier with each passing day. But now, it wasn't just her conscience she had to contend with, it was the people who had bought her silence all those years ago. The wealthy family who had taken Igor as their own in exchange for money, they were watching her every move. At first, it was subtle. A car parked outside her apartment for hours. A stranger lingering near the school gates where she taught, and then the anonymous note slipped under her door. "Stay away from him," they warned, their words cold and menacing. But Vera wasn't one to be intimidated easily. She had sacrificed too much, her dignity, her peace of mind, even her own happiness for Igor. And now that he was back in her life, she refused to let anyone take him away again. But the threats escalated faster than she could have imagined. One night, as she walked home through the dimly lit streets after tutoring a student, a black van screeched to a halt beside her. Before she could react, rough hands grabbed her, pulling her into the darkness. Her screams were muffled by a cloth pressed over her mouth, and within seconds, everything went black. When she woke up, she found herself in an unfamiliar room, tied to a chair. The air was thick with tension, and the faces staring at her were devoid of mercy. A man stepped forward, his voice low but dripping with menace. "You've been warned, Vera. Why can't you leave well enough alone?" She struggled against her restraints, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "I won't let you erase him," she spat, her voice trembling but defiant. They didn't respond with words instead. Their fists did the talking. Blow after blow landed on her fragile frame, Each strike meant to break not just her body, but her spirit. Yet through the pain, Vera clung to one thought: Igor. He was alive because of her sacrifice, and she would endure anything to protect him, even if it meant enduring this torment. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time blurred in the haze of agony. But no matter how much they hurt her, she refused to give them what they wanted. "I'll never stop looking for him," she whispered hoarsely, her resolve unshaken. Finally, battered and bleeding, she was dumped on the outskirts of town, left as a warning. But Vera knew one thing for certain: they hadn't broken her, and they never would. Kristina's mother was not one to take chances. Her love for her daughter bordered on obsession, and she would stop at nothing to protect her. When Kristina began spending more time with Igor, her mother's paranoia reached new heights. She didn't just forbid the relationship, she hired private investigators to follow them, documenting every moment they spent together. The photos arrived in an envelope on her desk one evening, grainy but damning evidence of stolen glances, casual touches, and whispered conversations. To her, these images were proof of a dangerous liaison that could ruin her daughter's future. Without hesitation, she sent the photos directly to Mikhailo, along with a scathing letter accusing him of negligence. "Your son is corrupting my innocent child," she wrote, each word dripping with venom. When Mikhailo received the package, his blood boiled. He had always prided himself on maintaining control over his life, but this felt like a personal affront. How dare Igor defy him so openly? That night, he confronted Igor, his voice icy and cutting. "Stay away from her," he ordered, slamming the photos onto the table. Igor stared at the images, his heart pounding. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. His own father, the man who barely spared him a second glance most days, now had the audacity to meddle in his life. But before Igor could respond, Mikhailo turned his back and walked away, leaving behind a chilling silence. The tension between them escalated into disaster during their next meeting. Kristina and Igor had planned a quiet evening at a secluded park, hoping to escape the suffocating scrutiny of their families. But as they sat beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, a group of masked men emerged from the shadows. They moved with terrifying precision, grabbing Igor first and pinning him to the ground. Kristina screamed, trying to run, but one of them caught her by the arm and threw her against a tree. Her head hit the trunk with a sickening thud, and she crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Igor fought desperately, clawing and kicking, but he was outnumbered. One of the attackers leaned close, his breath hot against Igor's ear. "This is your last warning," he growled. "If you see her again, it won't end well for either of you." Then, as quickly as they appeared, they vanished into the night. When Kristina woke up in the hospital, her body ached, and her mind was clouded with fear. Igor sat beside her, his face bruised and swollen, guilt etched into every line. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, gripping her hand tightly. But Kristina couldn't speak. Her throat was raw, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Both of them knew the attack wasn't random. It was a calculated move to tear them apart. And though neither said it aloud, the weight of what had happened settled heavily between them. A shared trauma that bound them together, yet threatened to destroy everything they held dear. Vera's lessons with Igor were supposed to be about literature, but they quickly became something more. At first, she seemed genuinely passionate about teaching him the nuances of storytelling, how Maupassant crafted his characters, how Balzac painted society with words. But as the weeks went on, Igor began to notice subtle shifts in her approach. She started weaving tales that felt eerily familiar, stories of betrayal, loss, and hidden identities. "The past never truly leaves us," she once said, her voice heavy with meaning. Igor nodded politely, but inside, a seed of suspicion took root. Why did every story feel like it was pointing back to him? One evening, during their session, Vera lingered longer than usual. Mikhailo had been out late at one of his private libraries, a fact Igor had grown accustomed to, but this time, he returned unexpectedly early. The house was quiet except for the faint murmur of voices drifting from Igor's room. Mikhailo froze outside the door, his chest tightening as he heard Vera's soft tone. He pushed the door open without knocking, his eyes blazing with fury. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Vera stood abruptly, her face pale. "We were just discussing literature," she stammered, clutching a book tightly in her hands. But Mikhailo wasn't listening. His gaze darted between them, suspicion morphing into rage. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" He spat, stepping closer to Vera. "You're using my son playing games with him for your own twisted purposes?" Igor tried to intervene, his voice shaking. "Dad, it's not like that. We're studying." But Mikhailo silenced him with a sharp glare. "Stay out of this, Igor. This woman has no business being in your room alone." The argument escalated rapidly, words turning venomous. Mikhailo accused Vera of manipulating Igor, of preying on his vulnerability. Vera defended herself fiercely, tears welling in her eyes. "I care about him," she insisted. "More than you ever will." That was the final straw. Mikhailo lunged forward, grabbing her by the arm and dragging her toward the door. Igor shouted, trying to pull his father back, but Mikhailo shoved him aside. "Don't interfere," he roared. When Vera stumbled out into the cold night, her heart shattered. She had come so close to bridging the gap between her and Igor, only to have it torn apart by Mikhailo's paranoia. As she walked away, she vowed silently that she wouldn't give up, not until the truth came to light. Mikhailo's absences had always been a mystery to Igor, but lately the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It wasn't just work that kept his father away, it was something far more insidious. One evening, while rifling through Mikhailo's belongings in search of answers about Vera, Igor stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see: a crumpled receipt from an upscale restaurant and a hastily scribbled note with a woman's name, Svetlana. His blood ran cold as realization dawned. This wasn't just another business meeting. This was betrayal. The man who had preached responsibility and family values was living a double life. Igor felt the ground beneath him shift. How could he trust a father who couldn't even be honest about where he spent his nights? The tension reached its breaking point when Mikhailo received a call late one night. His wife, the woman he claimed to have abandoned for freedom, was drowning in debt in Paris. She needed money and fast. "You've got to help her," she pleaded over the phone, her voice trembling. Mikhailo sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a leaden cloak. On one side was the woman he had married, the mother of his child, whose financial ruin would tarnish their family name. On the other side were Vera and Igor, two lives he had already neglected, but who now depended on him for survival. But Mikhailo's choice was not one of redemption. It was one of selfish preservation. He wired the money to Paris, leaving Vera and Igor to fend for themselves. When Igor discovered what his father had done, the betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. "How could you?" he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his anger. "She's your wife. But we're your family." Mikhailo didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, his face unreadable, a mask of indifference that only fueled Igor's hatred. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Vera, already teetering on the edge of despair, found herself unable to pay for her mother's medical bills. Her desperation grew, leading her to make choices she once thought unimaginable. Meanwhile, Igor withdrew completely, retreating into a shell of bitterness and mistrust. The bond between father and son, already fragile, shattered beyond repair. And as Mikhailo sat alone in his study, staring at the empty walls, he realized too late that his decisions had cost him everything, not just his family's respect, but their love. Kristina's life had become a suffocating prison, her every move dictated by her mother's iron grip. The once vibrant girl now walked through her days like a ghost, her spirit crushed under the weight of relentless control. Her mother confiscated her phone, monitored her texts, and even forbade her from writing poetry, claiming it was too emotional for someone her age. But Kristina couldn't stop writing, was the only way she could breathe amidst the chaos. Late at night, when the house was silent, she poured her anguish onto paper, crafting verses that spoke of despair and longing. One poem read, "I dream of wings to carry me far, away from these walls that choke my heart." It was a cry for freedom, a plea for escape. One fateful evening, after yet another argument with her mother, Kristina stood on the edge of her balcony, tears streaming down her face. She didn't want to die, but she wanted the pain to end. Just as she leaned forward, her trembling hands gripping the railing, Igor's voice called out from below. He had come to check on her, sensing something was wrong. That moment saved her, but it also left scars that would take years to heal. Meanwhile, Vera found herself under siege by the very community she sought to serve. Whispers followed her wherever she went, cruel tongues painting her as a manipulative predator. "She's using that boy," they hissed in hushed tones at the market. "What kind of woman preys on a child?" Even her colleagues at the school began to distance themselves, their once friendly smiles replaced by cold stares. Vera tried to ignore the rumors, focusing instead on her lessons with Igor. But the accusations cut deep, especially when anonymous notes began appearing at her doorstep, accusing her of greed and corruption. One note read, "Leave the boy alone, or we'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." Vera burned the note, but the fear lingered. She knew the truth, that her intentions were pure, but how could she prove it to a world blinded by suspicion? As Kristina retreated further into herself and Vera battled the storm of public judgment, their lives intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. Kristina saw Vera as a beacon of hope, a woman who defied societal norms to live authentically. Vera, in turn, recognized the flicker of rebellion in Kristina's eyes, a reminder of her own youthful struggles. Together, they became silent allies, bound by shared pain and resilience. Desperation drove Igor to places he never imagined he'd go. After learning of Vera's mounting debts and her inability to pay for her mother's medical treatment, he felt a crushing sense of responsibility. She had sacrificed so much for him, how could he stand by and do nothing? The idea came to him one sleepless night, horse racing. It was reckless, dangerous, but it seemed like the only way to make quick money. At first, luck appeared to be on his side. He won small bets here and there, enough to keep hope alive. But greed whispered in his ear, urging him to bet bigger, risk more. And then disaster struck. A single race wiped out everything, his winnings, his savings, even borrowed money from loan sharks who didn't take kindly to losing. The threats began almost immediately. Late-night calls with distorted voices warned him that if he didn't repay the debt, they'd come after not just him, but also those closest to him. "We know where your father works," one caller sneered. Panic gripped Igor as he realized the danger wasn't limited to himself. It extended to Vera and Mikhailo too. One evening, as he walked home through dimly lit streets, two men dragged him into a van. Darkness swallowed him whole. When he woke up, tied to a chair in an abandoned warehouse, the air reeked of fear and sweat. "Tell your daddy we want our money," one of them growled before landing a punch that sent shockwaves through his body. Blow after blow followed, each strike meant to break not just bones but spirit. "I'll get you the money," Igor choked out between gasps. "Just give me time." But time was something neither Igor nor Mikhailo had. Days later, a scandal erupted when leaked invoices revealed Mikhailo had been siphoning company funds to cover personal debts. The revelation spread like wildfire, destroying his reputation overnight. Colleagues turned their backs, clients pulled contracts, and the family found themselves drowning in public shame. Mikhailo sat alone in his study, staring at blank walls, haunted by the consequences of his choices. Meanwhile, Igor bore the physical scars of his ordeal, his face bruised and swollen, his body aching with every movement. Yet the emotional toll weighed heavier. He had gambled away not just money, but trust, the fragile bond holding what remained of his fractured family together. The storm raging outside mirrored the chaos within Vira's soul. After Igor's reckless gambling left him indebted to dangerous men, Vira found herself caught in a web of desperation and cruelty. She couldn't escape. The loan sharks had made their demands clear. Either Mikhailo paid up immediately or they would take it out on her instead. But when Mikhailo refused, too consumed by his crumbling reputation and financial scandal, they turned their wrath toward Vira with merciless precision. One night, as rain lashed against the windows of a dimly lit room, two men cornered her in an alley near the library where she often met Igor. Their voices were cold, devoid of humanity. "You think we're joking?" One sneered, grabbing her wrist tightly. "Your boy owes us big time. Either you pay now or you give us something else." Vera froze, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She tried to fight back, clawing at their hands, screaming for help that never came. But resistance only fueled their aggression. They dragged her into a deserted building, their intentions horrifyingly clear. As tears streamed down her face, she begged them to stop, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The humiliation was unbearable, every moment searing itself into her memory like a brand. Yet even in her darkest hour, Vera clung to one thought: protecting Igor. If sacrificing her dignity could shield him from further harm, then so be it. But Vera wasn't about to let them win, not entirely. That same night, driven by sheer willpower, she fled into the storm. Her clothes were torn, her body battered, but adrenaline propelled her forward. She ran blindly through the rain-soaked streets, her mind racing with fear and determination. Just as she reached the edge of town, headlights pierced through the darkness, a car speeding recklessly toward her. She tried to dodge, but the slick pavement betrayed her. The impact sent her flying, her fragile frame crumpling onto the wet asphalt. When Igor received the call hours later, his world shattered. He rushed to the hospital, his hands trembling as he gripped the phone. Doctors worked tirelessly to save her, but her condition remained critical. And amidst the chaos, Igor realized the truth. He wasn't just fighting for a mentor or a teacher. He was fighting for his mother. The realization hit him like a freight train, guilt and anger swirling inside him. How could life have dealt such cruel blows to someone who deserved none of this? Vera's life had become a tapestry of sacrifice, woven with threads of pain and resilience. Every decision she made, from selling her son as an infant to enduring the torment of watching him grow up from afar, was rooted in love so fierce it bordered on obsession. She had given up everything: her dignity when rumors spread about her intentions with Igor, her peace when loan sharks tormented her for his debts, and now, perhaps, even her life. On that fateful night after the car accident, as doctors fought to stabilize her fragile body, Vera clung to one thought: that her secret must remain buried. If revealing the truth would cost Igor his sense of identity or safety, then she was prepared to carry the burden alone until her final breath. But secrets have a way of unraveling, no matter how tightly they are guarded. As Igor sat by her hospital bed, clutching her hand, he found himself drawn to a small leather-bound journal tucked beneath her pillow. It was worn, its pages yellowed with age, but the words inside were unmistakably addressed to him. "My dearest Igor," the first entry began, "if you're reading this, it means I failed to protect you." The sentences that followed painted a harrowing picture of desperation. A young mother forced to choose between saving her dying parent and keeping her newborn child. Tears blurred Igor's vision as he read about the day she watched strangers take him away, promising themselves they could give him a better life. The revelation shattered Igor like glass underfoot. He staggered out of the room, gasping for air, his mind reeling with questions. Was this woman, this broken, battered woman, truly his mother? How could someone who loved him so deeply also make choices that felt so cruel? And most importantly, could he forgive her? The weight of societal judgment loomed over him. What would people say if they knew the truth? Would they see her actions as noble or monstrous? For days, Igor wrestled with these thoughts, torn between anger and awe at the lengths Vera had gone to ensure his survival. In the end, it wasn't logic but emotion that guided him. Sitting beside her bed once more, he whispered, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Though unconscious, Vera seemed to stir, her fingers twitching faintly. Whether it was coincidence or something deeper, Igor chose to believe she heard him. In that moment, he realized that love, true, unyielding love, wasn't bound by morality or convention. It was messy, painful, and often incomprehensible. But it was also beautiful. Igor stood at the crossroads of his life, the weight of truth pressing down on him like an unrelenting storm. The revelation that Vera was his mother had shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. For years, he had lived as an ordinary boy, unaware of the sacrifices made to keep him alive. Now, faced with the choice between continuing the charade or embracing the raw reality of his origins, Igor felt torn. Could he abandon the life he had built, the fragile connections with Kristina, the memories of Mikhailo, and pursue a bond with a woman who had given him away, but also sacrificed everything for him? Or should he bury the past and move forward, pretending none of it mattered? But fate wasn't done testing him yet. After the car accident, Vera vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a single letter tucked beneath his pillow. The handwriting was shaky, as though written in haste, each word dripping with emotion. "My dearest Igor," it began, "if you're reading this, I may not be around anymore. But please know, I have always loved you more than life itself. I made mistakes, terrible ones, and I beg your forgiveness. You are my sun, my heart, my reason for living." Tears blurred Igor's vision as he read on, her words piercing through the walls he had built to protect himself. Then came the chilling line, "They won't stop until they silence me completely. If I'm gone, find me. Look where the light can't reach." The cryptic message sent shivers down his spine. Was she still alive, hiding from those who sought to erase her existence? Igor clenched the letter tightly in his fist, determination burning in his chest. He couldn't let her disappear, not again. Not when he finally understood the depth of her love and sacrifice. Yet every step forward seemed fraught with danger. The same forces that had driven her into hiding might now come after him. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? What secrets had Vera uncovered that made her a target? And how far would he have to go to bring her back? In that moment, Igor realized he no longer had the luxury of ignorance. To save Vera, and perhaps himself, he would have to confront the shadows lurking in their shared past. It was a daunting path, one filled with uncertainty and peril, but he chose it anyway. Because deep down, he knew one thing for certain. Vera wasn't just his mother, she was his lifeline, his unfinished story.